Badfinger wrote one of pop's classic songs, Without You, recorded by over 200 artists. But within a few years, both the co-writers of that song had killed themselves.
Two people in one band, one person is sort of sad, but like two people, you think something is wrong.
Badfinger started out as the Ivies, a band from South Wales, who became the first group to be signed to the Beatles' Apple label. Changing their name to Badfinger, they had 3 top 10 hits in the UK and huge success in America, where they were hailed as the natural successors to the Beatles. The 1960s Swansea was a thriving hotbed of young bands. Ace guitarist Deke Leonard of the Man Band is one of Swansea's premier musicians and a long-time friend of the Ivies.
There were bands in every other house. On the street you lived, there were bands everywhere, and there weren't enough gigs to go around, so everybody was playing 6-7 nights a week.
Drummer Terry Williams played with many of the Swansea bands before graduating to Dire Straits.
There were the Meteorites, Fireflies, Corncrackers, Jets, Comancheros, and we just had all stupid names.
And it was a great scene.
Dominating the Swansea skyline is the rough and tough estate of Townhill. It was in his mum's council house that a 14-year-old Pete Ham made his first faltering notes in his band The Panthers. He soon teamed up with pal and guitarist Di Jenkins.
We got not a booking, but a gig as such, in a mental home in Swansea, which we didn't mind because it had a stage, it had lighting, and we'd done that and we went down all right. We progressed then to, we had our first booking in a pub.
Pete's band went through many changes, but settled down to include bassist Ron Griffiths and a 15-year-old drummer, Mike Gibbons.
And Ron Griffith came to my house. And I'm like, whoa, what's that? You know what I mean? And he asked me if I wanted to do an audition to join the band. I went, oh, he's a mod. Because he was a mod. He had the mod haircut, you know, and the mod club, and I'm a rocker. Anyway, they gave me the job, and I was like, I'll give it a shot, you know, see how it works out. And they proceeded to cut my hair the very next day to look like them.
Even in these early days, Pete Ham was learning to write his own songs. 1966, and the Ivies were now top of the pile in Swansea, gigging 4 times a week and often twice on Saturdays. At the Regal Ballroom, Ammanford, they shared the billing with top 10 group The Mojos and were approached by their 50-year-old roadie, Bill Collins.
What made them so special wasn't the stage act. They didn't have one. It was the way their voices blended. But more than that, the kind of material they chose. Real rhythm and blues type stuff.
Within months, Bill was back in Swansea, offering them a job backing singer David Garrick, who had a hit with Mick Jagger's Lady Jane.
Bill came down and arranged a meeting with all the families. And he didn't promise. I think his words were, all I'm going to promise is blood, sweat and tears, or worse than that, if I'm not going to promise anything, but they're good enough to make it in this business. We'll get work, and we'll take it from there. But it needs your blessing for the lads to leave home.
For the first time, they were let loose in swinging 60s London. Ivies were quickly becoming too much competition for David Garrick.
We're doing a gig in Ireland, and he's singing Mrs. Appleby, right? And the girls are screaming, screaming, screaming. And then I went, hang on a minute, they're over this side, they're screaming at Di Jenkins. There's a big crowd of girls in front of the stage, screaming at Di and the Ivies, you know? And I think that's why we got fired.
Because you heard that I was bad. Sausage and egg in the transport cab. Money is getting so low. But we still got...
With no David Garrick or regular gigs, money was tight. Bill had set them up in a rented house in Golders Green, already full of musicians.
We were on a retainer of about £5 each a week, which I know is £5 was more than 30, 40 years ago. But it was still pretty tight because we were all smokers, young men, we drank, and there was a toss-up with 10 cigarettes of extra cornflakes.
This is how much money we had. We had an apple tree in the backyard, thank God, which we didn't plant, and it was a mature one. So for breakfast, we'd have apple stew, you know, stewed apples. For dinner, we'd have, like, I don't know, apple pie. And for supper, we'd have a surprise, apple surprise, which was like, no apples left.
The house in Golders Green had a specially built mini studio, and Bill encouraged them to write their own songs.
No matter what you are, I will always be with you.
Pete Ham's girlfriend at the time was Beverly Ellis.
He spent every minute that he could in the studio. The others used to go in as well, but nobody went in as frequently as Pete. They would come back from a gig 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and on the way back he would have had an idea for a song. He would go straight into the studio, work through till 8, 9 o'clock.
Bill Collins, their roadie-cum-manager, kept them hard at it in the studio and kept the girls at arm's length.
I mean, it must have been awful for Bill because we were sneaking girls in and out the house because he hated women, you know. They would ruin his band, you know what I'm saying? And Di, being the immaculate babe magnet, he was like somewhere else. What's he doing? He's got women everywhere, you know what I mean? They're coming out of his pockets, you know.
Di was great on stage, but loved pulling the birds, which wasn't leaving him much time for work in the studio.
And Di was one of my best friends, obviously, you know, I mean, we were close. And we all got drunk that night, because we knew he was going to get the axe, you know.
Bill was responsible for the group's affairs and encouraged them to look for a replacement in his hometown, Liverpool. They came up with Tommy Evans. Marion Evans, Tommy's future wife, met him about this time.
Tommy was more extrovert, and then he could be introvert. He could be really quiet. He locks himself up in a room. He didn't want to talk to anybody, and then he comes out and he will be really wild again. No, I mean, Tommy was mad sometimes. He was a wild one. And working with Pete, sometimes it stabilized him. They were very close together. And as a songwriter team, they really matched each other.
On the breadline, with only the occasional gig, they struck lucky. Mal Evans, an old Liverpool mate of Bill, was impressed by the band's demo tapes and took them to Apple Records, where he worked. The Ivies were the first group to be signed to the Beatles' Apple label.
I can remember the boys running around, literally running around the house, saying, Apple, Apple. You know, they just couldn't believe it. This was a dream for any band at that time, that the Beatles were interested.